listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Twilight Show here on Teachers Talk Radio. I hope you are all well. We've had the sun out. The sun's been out a little bit. I've seen it. It's real. It is still out there somewhere. Today is one I've been waiting for a while because I've got a very knowledgeable guest on this evening, guys, to talk about all things SEND and EHCP, and particularly thinking about the government's white paper and the potential changes that we're going to see surrounding SEND provision, and what we can actually, how we can move forward with that. So my real sort of aim of this, before I introduce my guest today, guys, is just to really get our heads together, because I do see people coming at this from very different angles. So as teachers in schools, we all know well on here on Teachers Talk Radio what the challenges are at the moment, and the issues that we have with supporting the increasing needs that we have in classrooms at the moment. But sometimes there is a bit of a disconnect, I find, on social media. We know that social media has a particular polarizing effect on the discourse. But really, this is just thinking about what a different point of view. So I've got a guest on today, Ellie. Now, Ellie does an awful lot around SEND needs. I know that she runs a charity as well that does plenty outside school. I know that she has direct experience with EHCPs through her own child going through a mainstream school. And Ellie can fill in a lot of the gaps that I won't necessarily know as a teacher, in terms of, you know, what those issues are, what those struggles are. So the point today is to really bring this together, and I'd like to see a real sort of joint approach between parents and teachers, and we need to work together on these things, obviously. But I'd love to introduce this evening Ellie. I just want to thank Ellie ever so much for giving her time this evening. So Ellie, thank you for coming on. Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. How are you feeling today? What sort of day have you had today?
Yeah, thank you for having me, first of all, Tony. We've had a really positive day. Actually, my son's just got a specialist place at a specialist school, a brand new SEM one that's opened here in MK, and he had a really positive day. He spent his first 3 hours, solid hours there. So we've had a really positive day, and as you said,
Wow.
the sun was out as well. So yeah, winning at the moment. It feels like winning
Okay.
in life. He did 3 hours at school, which is probably the longest he's done in nearly 3 years, and the sun was out. So yeah, positive here.
So we were talking before we came on about the fact that your son, for some time, due to the issues in mainstream, didn't attend school. And obviously for you, getting that place, I suppose, in that special school is going to be huge, isn't it? And it's obviously taken a long time to get to that point. And one of the things that I really want to get into, so that anyone listening to this from a teacher's perspective can sort of like appreciate that. And obviously I will bring with me 25 years in the classroom as well. So between us, I'm hoping that we can get into some interesting things. So this is all about, guys, the government white paper, as we've mentioned, and this overhaul of the SEND system that the government want to bring in. I know that it's creating a lot of concern among parents. So we're definitely going to start talking about what our thoughts are on that. I just want to mention before I go on that our show this evening is sponsored by Hachette Learning, and Hachette Learning are publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. So if you're interested in leveling up your professional development, you can visit www.hachetteLearning.com to explore the full range of titles on there. I'd also like to mention AQA, second excellent sponsor of Teachers Talk Radio. AQA know that teachers are the real experts in the classroom, which is why they work closely with teachers, combining your insight with their assessment expertise to create resources, tools, training and guidance that genuinely make a difference. They're the UK's most chosen assessment organisation, so chances are you already know their work. And as we head into the exam season, AQA are focused on helping teachers feel supported and ready. So if you'd like to know a bit more about AQA, then you can head over to their website and find out more. And the last thing I want to say before we start getting into today's show is coming up very soon this weekend, guys, Teachers Talk Connect, which is our annual CPD and networking extravaganza. You can join the TTR team on Saturday, the 14th of March, which is this Saturday in Manchester, and tickets are free. They are still available. And if you'd like to get your hands on a free ticket to that excellent event, you can head over to ttrradio.org/connect 2026. So that's that bit. So, Ellie, we were talking earlier about what these changes are. I don't want to speak sort of for too long on this because I'd like to obviously hear your voice too. But I just wanted to mention just some of the key things. What are they actually proposing? And I've just had a little look around and found a summary. They've basically proposed a £4 billion overhaul of SEND provision. They want to get rid of what they call a one-size-fits-all system. The aim is to create inclusive mainstream schools, better early support, and reduce the need for parents to fight for help. Is what they're saying. We'll see what Ellie thinks about that in a bit. What they're saying is, a consultation. They're trying to put SEND and young people first. It says that schools must provide a universal baseline of high quality adaptive teaching and calm environments. So what they're saying is they want to improve the experience of students just in their classrooms, in terms of working on staff CPD. So they are going to try and develop the skills of staff to adapt their teaching. So better adaptive teaching in the classroom. They've talked about small group interventions like speech and language and sensory support. And they've got various levels that they've called targeted plus, and specialist. Now, what I think the idea is that the EHCP system, what the government have said, is it's slow. It takes a long time to get that support. Sometimes a lot of progress is tied up in tribunals, making things take longer than they should, meaning that much needed support is arriving too late. They're talking instead about having ISPs, which, as we said before, Ellie, are the non-legally binding ones. And it seems to me like the idea is if more kids are more children on the ISPs, that there will be maybe less dependence, if that's the right word, on the EHCP system, and less pressure on that system. And that is their argument, and that's what they are saying. So that's basically, in a nutshell, the main sort of parts of it. There may be some things that I've, that we'll get into. But as usual, before I do a show, I send over some questions. We're not just going to go through the questions one by one, but I suppose we've got to start really with your general feelings, Ellie. From your point of view, having looked into, and I know that you do a lot of work around this, and talk to various people around these issues. So what are your feelings on the new reforms, just generally?
I mean, taking, for example, what you just said and read off, I think that's the holy grail. I think, in principle, if they stuck to exactly what you just read out as what they were trying to do, I think it sounds amazing on surface level, because it does need a reform. It's archaic from all perspectives, and it's basically trying to fix the flood. It's a dam that's collapsing all around, and we're basically essentially plugging here and there with basically EHCPs or tribunals, which isn't helping anyone. However, when you start to break down what they're saying, such as the £4 billion, when you divide that into every single mainstream school in the UK, that's not a lot of money. It's maybe £100,000 per school, which will get you, from my understanding of their plan of making school more mainstream, is establishing a unit where 8 students could go with, I believe it's 2 TAs and 1 specialist teacher. Now, if you break down that 4 billion into mainstreams, it averages about £100,000 per school, which will pay for 1 teacher and 2 TAs based on that money, basically. Where's the rest of it? That's obviously me just breaking down very small maths, and that doesn't really help the rest of the school. So it will help those potential 8 students of higher need in that classroom, but it's not actually helping the rest of the school. It's not actually supporting the teachers who already have 37 children in their classroom. To give you my example, the reason my son struggled so much in year 4 was he was put into a classroom of 37 students, with 8 of them being very high need. 1 non-verbal, I think 5 of them had ADHD, including Max, who was obviously PDA profile, and along with a few others. And this one poor teacher with 1 TA, who was Max's 1-to-1, had to manage this class of 37 with their high needs.
Wow.
So it's complicated. It's not quite as simple. That 4 billion isn't going to really solve many issues. Don't get me wrong. It would have removed potentially the non-verbal child, who probably had a capacity of about a 3 or 4 year old, into that special unit. Absolutely. But it still would have left 36 children in that classroom. And then again, putting that as an example in our school, that 1 verbal child going to that specialised unit, Max would have also been considered to be put in that unit. However, they're chalk and cheese. So again, I'm not sure what the children who have very different abilities, very different stages of capacity and ability, along with teachers, I don't know how it would help either the children, either the teachers, or the parent themselves, if that makes sense. Knowing that your child could be potentially isolated, might be the wrong word to use, in this unit with 8 other high need children. So they're not getting the development that they need with peers, and same ability peers. So I always felt very sorry for actually this non-verbal child who was in my child's class, who was in mainstream. They clearly belonged in a specialist educational school supporting SEND, because again, she was isolated during break times. She would stay with the teachers. The other children didn't interact, didn't know how. We're talking about this child being from year 3, year 4, and now in year 6. And again, I felt sorry for the child. I felt, she wasn't getting the support she needed. I felt sorry for the staff, because how could they communicate with her based on a mainstream school, based on mainstream training? At the end of the day, you guys are teachers. You go to teach, and you do it wonderfully and beautifully. It's just, I don't think, like I said, this child, they're not able to teach her because of the mental capacity that she had. And it was just, I suppose it was it was just all round, one shoe doesn't fit every Cinderella, I suppose you'd say. So that 4 billion, the first comment, I suppose, isn't already sitting comfortably with me, because it doesn't fit all those holes. So when you divide 4 billion across the mainstream schools in the UK, there just isn't enough money to even implement 3, 4, and 5, which is more training for teachers. Well, 1, teachers are already over capacity. If you literally downed tools at 3:15, nothing would get done. So again, giving you guys more training, that's great. 1, where will you fit that in? 2, how are you supposed to implement it in a class of 37 children, which again, on average, at least 5 of them are going to have some sort of SEND need. So how are you going to implement that if 1 is wearing headphones, and one is swinging from the rafters at the back. This is literally a physical example that I can give you in my child's class this year. How are you supposed to be able to cope with those two things going on, as well as all the remaining 34 children in your class who are trying to learn? I think it's I think it's way too much to ask to put pressure back on the schools. And again, basically what they're saying from my interpretation of the paper is that 90% of it will go now back to school to be responsible for, when half the problem we as parents face is we need a fact plus to be even able to start the EHCP process. You guys don't have time to do a fact plus because you have 37 children in your classroom and growing and SEND needs and break times and marking up and getting called to incidents and more training, more safeguarding. Again, it's quite worrying that their solution has been, let's put it all back in mainstream school, for you guys to now become not just teachers, teaching the future of the UK, but also then mental health counsellors, toilet guidance. I know TAs that are tracking other TAs to the toilet to make sure they're safeguarded as well, because they haven't received the training that they needed. They don't have the equipment that they need, so they bring someone with them as a third person there to make sure everything's okay and standard. So yeah, I think it's all well and good, their first, I suppose, message, but the implementation of it, actually, I don't think it's been thought through quite well. It just seems like they're dumping a lot of it back in schools and making no one legally responsible for it if it all goes wrong.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I'd not done the maths on that, so it's interesting what you said there in terms of how that might translate into actual people in the schools, LSAs and teachers. Certainly, I've seen what feels like a reduction in the number of LSAs and the amount of support that I get in classrooms, and I do sometimes miss really good LSAs who know the students really well, better than I did, and knew how to respond in certain situations, understood what sort of day that child was having when they arrived at my lesson.
You'll see even less of them now. One-to-ones are no longer being granted. Sorry, Tony, just saying, you'll see even less of them now. One-to-ones are no longer being granted on EHCPs unless in extreme situations.
One-to-ones are no longer, so nobody's going to be guaranteed one-to-one support on an EHCP.
Unless
is that what you mean?
Extreme style, yeah. Currently on EHCPs, one-to-ones are no longer a must-have, or you will get unless it's an extreme situation. That's my understanding of my local LA. They're just not doing them any longer because, one, they're not sustainable, and two, it's just too expensive. So that's from my understanding in my local LA. One-to-ones are no longer a thing.
That's interesting.
You have to share them around. So again, it's putting even further pressure back on mainstream schools and in teachers. And as you said, Tony, in your classroom, the value of a good TA is incredible, but you'll be seeing less and less of those as well. Sorry to tell you.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, it is a bit of a shame, isn't it? It's a bit of a worry that to think that could not improve in the near future. And obviously, sometimes it is there's financial drivers to that, isn't there? So it's like, it's tricky. By the way, I can hear you, but your sound is still a bit sort of, the suggestion was, I don't know, trying without the headphones that I just had come through, but I don't know if that'll work. But we'll work with it. You might just need to be a bit closer to the microphone. I don't know.
I can try and pull them more forward. I don't know if that's better or not.
Oh, that's a bit better. Yeah, that's a bit better. Yeah, nice.
I'll keep them there.
Yeah, lovely.
If I take them off, you're going to hear my child screaming and gaming, my dog barking on the window.
Yeah. Well, it's busy household. I have the same thing. I have to try and drag people off of the Wi-Fi to stop them using all the bandwidth of the Wi-Fi. But yeah, so that's interesting. I'm glad you raised that one, because that's not one that I'd sort of heard come through. And I'm going to ask you more about EHCPs as we go through, because it's something that, only a parent of a child with an EHCP can really explain. Obviously, some teachers are parents as well, but we don't always see that side of it. So I will be asking you a bit more about that as we go through. So yeah, I'd certainly share your concerns in terms of putting more things on schools. My understanding, from what I could gather just by looking this afternoon, was that the local authority will still be involved in the HCP. I think, I don't know, some people were worried that it might then all be put on schools in terms of, I don't know, the administration and oversight of it. But I did notice that the government had said they can take all powers away from LEAs when they don't do things properly. And my understanding, again, this isn't my specialist area at all, but my understanding is there is massive debts. What's the word? That the LEAs have run up in the process of administrating the HCPs, if that's the right word. It's hard to find the right words at this time of day after a full day.
That's the right word. That's how they're painting it, a massive debt or deficit. So basically, to give you an example, before you even start the EHC process, you basically request, can I have an EHCC assessment? You'll probably know that as well. And immediately, for example, our local LA will go, no, we're not doing it. And then you're allowed to go to mediation. So mediation, there's not enough evidence, you go to mediation. So each mediation, last year at least when I checked, cost £560 for each mediation session. So when I got a request to do an EHCP or go to tribunal, it was immediately, no, we'll go to mediation. So for £560 that the council spent on that, all I did was, no, thank you, give me my mediation certificate, we're going to tribunal, and put the phone down. And that's, again, every single, if you're going to mediation to request tribunal, that is generally 90% of the times your local LA has paid £560 to say that and get a certificate. I know parents, I know one parent that had a mediation certificate last Friday, again, £560 to sit with someone in the LA and someone from the school. And for the LA to go, well, why haven't you tried this OAP? Why haven't you tried this? Why haven't you tried that? When the school should have technically already done that in the first place. But again, another £560 just to go back. And this is, again, the parents have been fighting for, we fought for them to get Section 19 because the school didn't request it. Again, it's only something that schools can request. So I'm not judging schools or blaming them. But if you have a SENCO who has 2,000 students in their secondary mainstream school, where are they going to find the time to fill out a huge form for Section 19, which, let's face it, is not going to be likely the only child with entrenched EBSA. It's going to be probably 300. So again, the LA said to them, well, we should have put Section 19 in. We've already been in this problem. Again, another £560. I had to go to court last Thursday with another parent who's, again, it all does come back down to money, and that's why they keep blaming the money. Is to give you an example, so both her son and my son were in the same school, same diagnosis. My child had an EHCP, which came with funding for a one-to-one. Hers has nothing. They took her to court after a PACE meeting. We're due back on the 27th of March. So the same child, exact same pathway, exact same issues. I knew what I was doing, and after eventually 3.5 years, got my EHCP in specialist place, was never fined, was never had a PACE meeting, never taken to court. She's had PACE meeting, and again, which is really unheard of, from PACE straight to court. And again, it's all about money. It is all about money, because the school never reported us, never did anything like that when he was not attending because they had a one-to-one they could use elsewhere. Funnily enough, on this child, they're now taken to court. But the minute he left, and again, his attendance was 75%, which has been taken to court and working on it. They were working on it. His attendance had gone up. But this again shows you how important the money is, and the deficit, again, £560 per mediation certificate. My child had funding, hers didn't, so we'll take you to court and fine you. So it is all about money, and that's what the councils are using. At the moment, again, you're probably seeing a massive spend on transport. So a lot of these specialist schools are out of area. Parents have multiple children, they have to get taxis. So for example, with my child's specialist school was based here, but I know kids that are being driven 2 to 3 hours back and forth from this location because there is no other closest location to them. So again, if you think that's what, £120, £200 on a taxi at least one way, so it does all add up. So I understand something needs to be done, but again, it's not efficient. But I don't think you can blame families for pushing for it, and the same as schools. You need the LAs, you need the help, you need the TAs, but it does all come down, sadly, to money. As you know, that each school has a budget. Each SEND child comes with some sort of price tag or pocket or pouch of money. But again, it's one thing that I understood as well. So, for example, when Max first got onto the SEND register, he came with, I think it was about £6,000 per SEND child, I believe it is. But that £6,000 doesn't actually get spent directly on that child. It goes into a pot, which can be spent on X, Y, and Z. However, I do agree with what they're saying about early intervention. Had that £6,000 been spent that year in reception on my child, we might have a very different situation where I'm not costing them £120,000 a year, which is what my EHCP is now, because it escalated so badly, got left for so long, went to mediation, we've been to tribunal, he's now on a package in a private SEM school for £120,000 a year.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. But that has taken 3 years to get that to.
5 years.
5 years.
EHCP, tribunal, school, about 5 years in total to get him to where he is now. I'll be honest with you, I think he could have done quite well in mainstream if we'd had early intervention, the right support, and if we didn't have to battle for everything. To be fair, we had to battle in primary from both points of view. The schools didn't agree with some of the things we saw. We had to battle CAMS to get the psychiatrist involved, to get things involved. The Fact Plus, we had to wait for ages. It was a mess. ADHD assessment, the school would tell us, oh yeah, he's clearly got ADHD. Then they'd give us a paperwork which wasn't worth what it was written on. So we'd waste CAMS time, we'd waste school time, back and forth. So it took about 5 years. So you can imagine the money that's been spent on the back and forth thing. And again, like I said, each mediation certificate is £560. And if you think about, I think there's at least 3,000 mediation cases a year in a minimum in each LA. So you do the math on that one. That's not even tribunal. Tribunal costs an average of £3,500.
So the mediation is the stage that they insist you do before it goes to a tribunal. Is that right? So
mediation is to see if you can get an agreement. So say, for example, someone at your school would say, okay, well, we want a EHCP needs assessment. The LA will look at the supposed proof of the evidence that the family has put forward and the school have put forward, if they have, and reject it. So then your school, so you, the LA and the family will then, and a mediator, so a legal mediator will then sit on that meeting with you to discuss a way forward to see if they can get a way forward without going to tribunal.
I see.
If you are looking to go to tribunal straight away, you're going to, like I said, do the same phone call we did. No thanks, send me the certificate.
Right. So the mediation is what, between yourselves and the school, or yourselves, the school, and the LEA, or? Pretty
much, yeah. So it's between the parties in general. Ours was just with the LA and the mediation because we wanted to go to tribunal. The families that I generally speak to are at EHCP request needs, because obviously everyone's now literally, excuse the word, scavenging for EHCPs before the white paper comes out. I was in 3 mediation meetings last week with 3 different families, all requesting EHCPs, which were rejected. But those 3 families alone cost £560.
Yeah. Oh wow. Okay. So it sounds like a bit of a mess at the moment. So it's so you obviously do understand the need that does need to be different. There needs to be changes of some kind. There needs to be a faster system, and that's what the government are saying. Some earlier intervention. So do you feel like one of the things here that I found is that they're looking to only issue the EHCPs for the most complex needs? So yeah, I just wondered sort of how you felt about that, really. So do you think there might be some families that are pushing for an EHCP in a situation where they're just looking for that extra support, or that the student doesn't necessarily need? Do you think people are abusing the system?
I wouldn't use those words. I would use potentially the words of they feel like they have no other option. So the SEND white papers come out. It's terrified probably the entire community, not just parents, not just charities, not just TAs, not just teachers. It's scared a lot of people about the possibilities of what could happen. So as I mentioned before, we are now seeing families literally running the gauntlet, scavenging to do everything they can to get an EHCP, because these are legally binding to a certain point, till 2030 anyway. they think that this is a golden ticket. I know personally from having run the gauntlet many a times, it is not a golden ticket. We got our EHCP with £30,000 funding and still had nothing for 3 years. So it's not the golden certificate that people think it is, but what it does do, it gives you 2 little legal legs to stand on. So you can go back to the LA, or you can go to San Dias, or you can go, to somewhere and go, I've got a legal leg to stand on this. Can you help me? Without one, people feel like they're powerless. You've got nothing, you've got nowhere. It's like, again, as parents, we drop children off at school, and actually a lot of the things that go on in schools, you don't have a choice about it, and neither do we. We drop them, they're fine. You probably have students that are kicking off in reception, heaving because they're crying so much and so distressed, and yet you've got to tell mum, that's it, sorry, he's fine, leave him here, even though they're not. Can you hear me?
Oh, your sound's just gone really, it's gone really clear now. Don't know what's happened there.
My headphones have disconnected.
Oh, there we go. So it might have been the headphones that were the problem in the first place. No, that's
Probably,
interesting.
my bad.
So you think, I suppose what the government might say is that they've brought in these ISPs, the individual support plans, right? So those are something that the schools have to put in, but they're not legally, they're not sort of legally binding. They don't have that legal backup. So what they say about the ISP, I'm just going to remind myself of it, that there's 3 levels of support, it says here. There's targeted plus, and specialist. So these 3 sort of levels, and it says the most complex needs for a revised EHCP would be for the specialist support. And it says, I suppose what the government might say is, even if you don't get the EHCP, there is still the ISP, which is mandatory for the schools to do. So they use the word mandatory. It doesn't have a legal backing. Is that of any consolation, do you think, to those parents who are well, no,
because we've already got those in place. We already have them in place as SEND support plans, I suppose. In my view, they already exist as SEND support plans, which, to my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, should be reviewed termly by local LAs to make sure they are followed anyway. However, because, for example, in our constituency, we have at least 10,000 children on the SEND register, I know full well that isn't happening. I mean, we're not getting EHCPs in time. For 500, I think it was about 500 odd children in Milton Keynes are currently requesting them, let alone have them. So again, it's down to maths, Tony. How can we expect people to have the time to legally go through them and check up on those SEND support plans and ISPs when they don't even have time to do the EHCPs, which are the legally binding contract? And I think that's where people are terrified at the fact that if you're tier 1, we see it happen all the time as well now. You might have a tier 1 child who's doing really well, which is what happened with the child that I said I was in court with last week with his parents. He was doing really well. They had put OAPs in place for him, and he was doing better. His percentage of attendance went up from 64% to 75%. And what did they do immediately? The LA do? Removed it all. He's thriving. The school and the LA removed it all, saying, "Oh, he's doing well. It's fine. Get rid of it all." And obviously, the parents didn't have a leg to stand on because he's just on a SEND support plan. They literally came in and said, "Your kid's got ARFID, but the teacher he has lunch with and feels safe with to eat." Well, then they literally said to them, he can't have her all to himself all the time. Other kids need her, so she's going to go with other kids now. No warning. Nothing. She had no power. And again, as a teacher, she felt so bad because she had no power. She just went where she was told. So I think that's where a good example of it being terrifying that we have no legal legs to keep not only schools being able to support these children like you want to, because we know there are good people in schools, we know there are wonderful teachers, we know there are lovely TAs in school that really want to help, but when they're told to ship off and go, they have no choice. And we as parents have no legal binding, I suppose, to support our children in schools. You hand them over and it's done. It's gone.
I understand that.
Now, for example, now that my child's in a specialist school, the scary thought is if I ever wanted to pull him out and do homeschooling, I can't. I have to ask permission from the LA to remove my child from school.
And today is his first day, so the jury will be out in terms of how he gets on there, I guess. And yeah.
Oh no, he's not his first day. He's done the 3 hours, but we've actually been going since November. So
okay,
exactly that. So it is terrifying for everyone involved. And if you think they're changing the SEND support plan to, they're calling it a new name of IEPs, that's I think exactly what it is. And if you're looking at only that, you've done tier 1, escalated to tier 2, you're still on the same thing. There's no legal support for the schools. There's no legal structure for parents, nothing like that. Okay, we're on tier 2. There's kids cracking. We're seeing, the mental health team are involved and they still don't know what we're doing. Okay, we're going to escalate to tier 3 now. By the time you hit tier 2, I'll be honest with you, Tony, the horse is bolted. You all know that. The kids, in burnout, it's in mental health issues. The family, I had to quit my full-time role to be able to accommodate my child's needs and his part-time timetables over the years and things like that. School find themselves, you become a babysitting service of where to keep this child in what room safe until 3 o'clock rolls round, and who's going to take turns in doing that. And to the fact that you have to go through all these tiers before an EHCP is even considered. So it's like you've got to hit frying pan, fire, bonfire before anything gets sorted. And that's not just for the parent's point of view or the child, that's from the school's point of view as well. You have to literally hold Guy Fawkes until someone actually listens or it explodes, and then get an EHCP, and by then it's far too late. Child's in entrenched EBSA. You've done all the things that you've been able to do as a school, but you've still lost this child due to EBSA because you weren't able to put the things that you wanted to put in, so on and so forth. I think removing EHCPs and making it for the most drastic is going to cause a lot of problems in school, but also I think you'll find an avalanche of parents pulling children out. I know parents with neurodiverse children in schools who are currently okay. I won't say thriving. They're okay. They're doing all right because they've got great support work of teachers and who can see it and who make little amendments for them where they can, and OAP amendments for them. But if you think a lot of these children might hit secondary and still be okay. No, I mean, they don't hit tier 2. They never get over tier 2. They never get over tier 4. However, they might get to college and then suddenly explode, hit burnout, and then what do? It's too late. It's all too late.
I've definitely seen what you mean by. Sorry, Ellie. I've definitely seen what you mean in terms of students, when it is too late and that student has gone into just survival mode. And I have seen as well, I do remember a situation with a young man who was new to my class. There'd been some changes in the sets. This young man came in who was autistic, and he had a particular signs that he would show that he was about to go into a meltdown. And when he initially came to me, no one really told me that. I had to sort of go and find out this information. And for the first 3 lessons I taught this child, all 3, he had a complete meltdown, and to the point where at one stage it became physical, and I was getting things being picked up, and it was very scary, to be honest. But then what I said was, this isn't working. They changed the makeup of the class, so we changed the groupings around, and we found a situation, someone who he trusted. And once we got it so that I understood his needs, I understood his triggers, and I understood his signs that he was about to go into that meltdown, that I was then able to support him. And then it started to work. So there will be situations where you can manage things that will work, but that is very dependent on a lot of other factors, isn't it? And one thing that I've often thought as well, it's about how other students respond. I've had students with autism, and other students unfortunately won't understand that. They'll enjoy the show in terms of having a bit of a wind up of that student. So I've had to put that student where I can hear what's being said to him, so I then can pick up if things are being said that aren't, so I can intervene before things get out of hand. So there's so many, and that is the issue I think with mainstream, is you can't take away those external factors. So, I mean, and I don't know what the government are saying in terms of special schools, whether they're increasing them or that. I've not really looked into that. So are they saying that by talking about more adaptive teaching, do we assume that the message is that we're going to have less special school places and we are going to try to have more students in mainstream? What's your take on that?
It could go one of two ways. One is I think they're looking at less approval of schools or specialist schools and try and push towards mainstream more, which again will reduce prices right down. Classic example, max in a mainstream school, 30,000, max in a private, I suppose in a private SEM school, 120,000. Isn't a good example of why they're pushing them all back to mainstream. What they're proposing is, for example, and it's quite terrifying for me personally when this white paper came out. They're looking at big transition years. So my child's currently at the end of year is doing year 6 and will end year 6 in September, is reviewing his EHCP and if he needs to be in a specialist situation for secondary. So they're now, this white paper suggests that, for example, they can review him that completely and re-diagnose him. Well, not re-diagnose him, but reassess his EHCP and his needs and go, okay, well, he spent a year in special school. He's all right now, and we can ship him off to mainstream into 2,000 people versus a 90 pupil school. They can reassess mainstream as well. So say you've got a child who's coping beautifully in a smaller junior school, coming to the end of year 6. It's a small school. It's only got 500 students throughout the years. Now he's going to a massive 2,000 odd enormous mainstream secondary school. But no, he's fine. He's fine. Don't need anything. We'll take him off a support plan entirely. And this is what we're dealing with. So then that secondary school gets a piece of paper that says, this child's coming to you in this year with nothing. So the teachers don't have any warning that this child actually for years has had a SEND support plan and may need some extra support because they're anxiety riddled or because she displays a PDA profile that hasn't been diagnosed. It's so hard to get, but no warning. They could just literally go, no, we're just to reassess you now. You don't need any of this support. You're fine. You're absolutely normal. You're fine. Off you go. Off you trot. Which puts, again, children, teachers, schools at a massive disadvantage and parents again. Because we can sit there and go, my child's coming over to you in year 7, but I can't give you anything because they've just been reassessed. They were on tier 2, but apparently now they're back on tier 0.
So that's mad.
The whole thing's scary from every perspective.
And I think all the statistics points to well-being and the enjoyment and the happiness of students. I'm trying to think of the right word. Decreases in as they go into year 7. I did see a graph on this where it was like a cliff edge through the SATs in year 6 and then into year 7, and then things did pick up a little bit, maybe later on a secondary school, but that initial. Something's going quite wrong, I think, at key stage 3 level when they make that step up. And it goes back to what I said before. I can't remember if I said this off air or when we were on air, but when you have less LSAs, when you have, I remember the days where I would have an LSA or maybe even more than one in the lesson, and they knew the students inside out. So they would come to me with the students, knowing what sort of day that student have had, able to tell me straight away what day they were having as they came in with that dialogue that you could have with them. They knew the needs better. Obviously, we are expected to know all of the needs of all of the students in every class. Absolutely. But just think for a minute about the actual how difficult that is to do. And it's, I mean, generally something will happen and then you're forced to go and look in, not forced to, but then you go and look in a bit more detail and then you think, oh, I didn't realize this. So it's, it is scary, isn't it? And certainly I can understand that because it scares me. So certainly as a parent, it's magnified, isn't it? I should imagine.
I mean, it is magnified to the fact, for example, again, I mean, Tony, you have children. Imagine your rights being taken away from you, basically, essentially, on your child's needs. But again, at the same time, in my charity where I have parents and carers meetups and meetings, I do also advocate massively that I think parents also should have more empowerment. They should know more. they should seek out more information. They should know their rights. They should know their children's rights as well. It's not all just dependent on the school and the LA. For many, many reasons, as a parent, I had to learn and deep dive and do different courses, educate myself on rights, on what a PDA profile looks like, on this and that. And I know many parents who have gone above and beyond. I know parents who could probably write better EHCPs than LAs because of the training they've had. I know parents who could, literally sit in the courtroom and get an AOTIS package for other people because they've been through it. I know so many incredible parents who have gone and done it themselves. But I also know many parents and carers who come in and going, well, it's not my problem, is it? It's the school's problem. And the way I use it is, if your child was born deaf, you would learn British Sign Language. You would do everything you could to be able to make sure your child could communicate. You would go to the school that had the best loop system. You would go to the best doctor for the best hearing aids or anything like that. What I don't understand is a lot of parents or carers don't do the same for the neurodiverse child. It isn't just the neurodiversity that people have to look into. It's what's behind it and their rights, their legal rights, as well as parents, as children, as young people, to what they can get and ascertain. The schools aren't going to have all the answers because they don't know your child. Each child or young person is different and is going to have different needs. And I think the only people that can advocate loudly and proudly on exactly what that child needs is a parent. But if you don't know what you're entitled to, what you can do, what you can't do, I had a parent come in the other day and said, right, Ellie, I want that school that your kid goes to. And I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. Did you, what EHCP do you have? Oh, I have a SEND EHCP. And I had to explain to them that it's a SEM school that's not going to work. But they couldn't understand the difference between SEND and SEM and why there was a different school. It was just the best school for autistic people in Milton Keynes, and that's what they wanted. And I was like, that's not the way it works. So again, I had another parent ask me, my school's not following the LA's OAP. And I was like, well, okay, what school is it? And it ended up being an academy. And I said, well, unfortunately, academies sort of abide by their own rules. They're not, they don't have to bow down to the LA. They do legally, but not on OAPs. So again, it's explaining these kind of things to parents who don't understand the system. A lot of them don't know they can apply for their own EHCPs. A lot of them don't know that they can ask for different things and go different places. So I also a big advocate. I do believe parents also need to take empowerment and some responsibility on the way their child is educated, what they're entitled to, and also support the school. As you just said, if you've got 30 odd children in a classroom, you have to learn every single child's profile. That's near impossible. It's near impossible. And then the yellow, green, red and blue system when they come in. That's great when they come in, they're all on green. After lunch, they're going to be on red because they're tired or they didn't have time for their lunch or they didn't get to play with the friend that they wanted. Now you've got to teach those 35 children all in the red zone. But throw in an autistic child who's having a meltdown or a bad day because mum packed the wrong food or didn't pack the right food. Then the ADHD child at the back there who's swinging off the back of the chair. But you still also have, again, those 30 odd children to teach and get through this lesson without the rest of it going on. It's not fair.
And that's the issue. I mean, we can know. I mean, that is part of obviously the battle is to know the students really well. But then even when you do know, what are these amazing adaptive strategies that's going to allow us to manage those students in the examples that you've just given? Because I don't think there really are any magic solutions to that. Now, you can have the best training in the world on SEND as a teacher, but that doesn't mean that you're going to have a strategy that's going to be effective or even the time to employ that strategy on a one-to-one basis when there's other issues going on. So, I mean, yeah, I just want to, before we go on, I just mention again our sponsors, and then I've got, we'll get into, we haven't really scratched the surface of all the questions I wanted to ask, but it's been really interesting so far. So thanks. There's plenty that you've said that I feel like it's a learning sort of curve for me as well. I wanted to mention Hachette Learning, guys, because this show is sponsored by Hachette Learning, and Hachette Learning are publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. So if you'd like to level up your professional development, you can do so by checking out www.hachetlearning.com and having a look on there and exploring the titles on there. AQA as well know that teachers are the real experts in the classroom, which is why they work closely with teachers like you, combining your insight with their assessment expertise to create resources, tools, training, and guidance that genuinely make a difference. So if you're interested in finding out more about AQA as being the UK's most chosen assessment organisation, then head over to their website and have a look at the sort of things that they are doing over there. So that's AQA, who are sponsors of our show as well, guys. So we're getting up into the last 10 minutes, and what came over was I had a question, and we've also really talked about this, but I've had this question that's come through from a different teacher through Teachers Talk Radio that they just wanted to say, and it's something that I think we've already mentioned. But they say, do you think it's reasonably possible for a class teacher with 32 students and either one LSA or no LSA to be able to help students in a mainstream classroom? They know how hard it is to deal with a child with additional needs on a one-to-one basis. Can they imagine how difficult that is trying to balance it with a full class? So also mentioning that a legal right doesn't mean the teachers have the resources. So yeah. What does it say? Are teachers also victims of a broken system?
Absolutely.
And so it sounds like, like I said before, you've seen a lot of this. Obviously, your frustrations, I could understand why you might want to, like, some of your frustrations might have come from how the school has worked with you. Do you feel like schools aren't listening, Ellie? Do you think that's a bit of an issue?
No, I think that's probably a little bit unfair. I think some schools are terrible at listening. I think that some SENCOs do come across as we know better. I think, again, each experience is different. However, I think schools are drowning, to be perfectly honest, already. They're already drowning. What isn't going to help, as I mentioned, is the absolute avalanche schools are going to see in June of either people choosing to home educate, or they're going to see an avalanche of EHCPs come forward, is what I believe is going to happen in the world at the moment, because that's the world. Oh, sorry, I shut the phone. The world that we're seeing at the moment is a demand for EHCPs before this white paper goes to town. Because again, an EHCP is legally binding. However, I see the schools are already crippled. LAs are being taken away. So again, no one-to-ones are being issued now. They try to do it. So it's, again, I remember it started to happen when Max was in the mainstream. They're like, oh, he has normally it's called like a safe person. They turned it to safe people because they couldn't guarantee the same person on the same day. But I'm like, he has an EHCP he pays for. It's all changed. But I think schools are basically being handed their head on a platter already with this white paper, because again, people are just pushing it all back on schools. So not only does the SENCO now have, we had a SENCO that taught as well. So not only does you have to teach, not only are teachers already time shy or time poor, sorry, not time shy, wrong words to use, but then you've got the SENCO who's now teaching, but also doing SENCO. And we're saying that mainstream schools are going to open their doors to every single child. That's fine, but then you're going to have, again, children missing out, because you're going to have children who are going to go without that support, because Tony's over there with the new 8 students that we've got that we had to accommodate, because we were told to, because we've been given £100,000 this year to deal with it, in the porter cabin over there. Which is what our school already had. So we had the nest, and it was the porter cabin, but none of the teachers, none of the children wanted to go in it, because that's where all the the TAs ate their lunch, and it smelled weird because of all the different foods. So they refused to go in it. So they built this purpose-built unit that no one wanted to use. They all wanted to be outside because of the smells or the surrounds or the overwhelming talk. But again, I think, coming back to your question, I don't think schools are to blame. No, I think teachers are overworked, definitely underpaid, be given way more responsibility than they should. And again, it comes back to my statement of, I think more should be given to parents. Give us more responsibility, give us more laws, give us more legalities over our own children and the process of our education, and choose what we can do for them. And I think it will take a lot of the responsibility back off your teachers, mainstreams. I just don't know how mainstreams are going to cope with this new white paper. It's not just because I've been through mainstream and now he's in a specialist school. I am just really worried about mainstreams as they are at the moment, who are already breaking. Now imagine that you're opening the floodgates for tens of that. Again, all these children from specialist units, if they're going to be closing them down or reducing those numbers, are now going to flood back into mainstream schools. We're talking about PRUs, we're talking about, LA-owned specialist schools, if they close those down, pushing them all back into mainstreams. I just think it's a really, really scary thought, because again, you guys went to university to teach, but we're asking you to be counsellors, toilet assistants, wipers, mental health nurses, SEND codes, EHCP experts, all this thing. I think it's just too much. It's just too much on people. At the end of the day, everyone's human. You guys are human teachers. I just think it's too much.
Yeah, it certainly is. An awful lot to balance and to plate spin at one time. I mean, what's interesting is, I don't know how you feel about the huge increases in need that we seem to be seeing. Now, presumably, you can't, if someone has a diagnosis of an autistic spectrum disorder or ADHD, those issues have always been there. It is my feeling, but I'm just wondering why we are seeing so much more diagnosis of certain needs. Do you think there's been some overdiagnosis? Do you think some parents are looking down the wrong avenue in terms of it? I'm just sort of trying to understand. Do you think maybe it's schools being a bit more strict, and because schools seem a bit harsher and a bit less nice place to be, that we're finding those needs? I'm just sort of trying to think about are there any other sort of external issues that are causing this massive increase in diagnosis, or to look for diagnosis?
I have my own theory, Tony, and I call it the Darwin theory. It's my own little theory. Sorry, Darwin, if I offend anyone. But I think, again, if you look at school as a whole, it's quite an archaic system. Not a lot really has changed since probably Victorian times. However, humans have. So if you think since, the education system's evolved, we put people on the moon, we've got VR, augmented reality, Elon Musk's, Greta, who at 16 is, taking over the world. I don't believe in all these people or advocate for them. But I think, again, humans have evolved slightly. We've got COVID babies who had to adjust to all online. I think as a society as well, we're not quite as sociable as we used to be. And learning social skills, again, I call it, with my child's autism, I call it the less fluff flavor. And he has no fluff. It's literally just black and white. It's like, to his nan, oh, you're old, aren't you, at 76? There's just no fluff. So for me, my theory is that it's a case of, I suppose, in one way, human evolution. We're cutting a lot of the fluff out. But what we've also done is cut out all the creativity and individuality in people. Whereas society now, social media, society, COVID, everything's sort of about this being free. Your mental health, it should be this, it should be that. You should be on a farm free ranging it with, chickens. And I think we're creating a society where having a voice is really important, which I think is wonderful. However, you're giving voices to 5, 6-year-old children who don't quite know what to do with that voice at the time. But I think it is a case of evolution. We're seeing humans evolve. So my child is extremely different from when I grew up in the 80s, which was an extremely different environment to be in now. So when I was born in the 80s and grew up in the 90s, it was so different. I also grew up in Spain, where the school system was enormously different. But it's like worlds apart. My mother grew up in this, in the 60s. Again, it's a different world altogether. And I just think we're seeing people evolve. Back in the Victorian times, cars had only just been an invention. People went to school to learn how to sit in a factory or build something. Girls were only just allowed in. And now we're seeing different humans, like my 11-year-old can work his way around the PC, like I can't. I didn't even have a PC until I was 16. So I think those things all have to be taken into account. I don't think it's a overload of diagnoses. I just think it's, rather than the education system and the healthcare system keeping up with us evolving. I suppose to give you an idea, the BMI chart is still based on World War II weights. We were all starving in World War II. We were all on rations, but the BMI chart still reflects World War II.
Okay,
weights.
that makes me feel a bit better, Ellie,
The
have to
education
say.
system, I think, is quite similar.
Yeah,
So,
I
old system,
yeah, that does.
new kids.
Yeah. Things are definitely changing. I do agree with what you're saying. Schools haven't really adapted. Schools haven't been able to adapt, I don't think. But you're absolutely right. It is a different society. I sometimes wonder, as a secondary school teacher, an idea that's been in my mind for a while is it might be time to have specialist Key Stage 3 teachers, so students aren't being moved around when they arrive at a big school with, up to 2,000 students in, like you say, and they're here, there, and everywhere around the school. There's changeovers, there's older students. Sometimes younger students come to me still eating at the end of break, my year 7s, and they'll say things like, well, the older kids have pushed in and I've been pushed to the back. So I don't know whether we need to specialise a bit more in Key Stage 3 to make it a little bit more of a similar to Key Stage 2 and primary, whether they have fewer teachers who know them better, teachers who understand their needs better. They have a smaller number of adults who work with them, perhaps. It's probably not going to fix all or even many problems, but it's just it really is stark to me just how things change when students transition from primary to secondary, and the sort of
time. To be honest with you, I think there's a wonderful saying that time fixes everything, and I think it's key when they do look at the SEND paper and rewrite it all, is that in any way they can give teachers back time to spend with their students. I think is going to be a key element, because there's only way you can teach a child or a young person is getting to know them and their style. You will have students that are absolute math whiz kids, and you'll have students who are, flourishing Dagars, and you'll never have them both in the same room with the same ability. However, we only seem to nurture the math whiz kids, not the Dagars. So again, I think if teachers had more time to spend with their students, but also I think if students had more time doing what gives them confidence and boosts their confidence, they might enjoy school more. So say if they had terrible at maths, they got 1 hour of intense maths per day, but they spent the rest of it doing art, cooking, humanities, history, they might be more inclined to go to school, knowing that they're actually building on their strengths. I think one parent said to me once, if your child was really good at tennis but really bad at maths, what tutor are you getting? And I was like, oh, well, the maths one, surely, because they're bad at maths. And she's like, no, I'm getting the tennis because he's good at it. So I'm going to invest in a tutor to make sure his skills and his talents thrive. I'm not going to spend time and money on something that he doesn't like and enjoy and isn't bad on. And that stuck with me. And that's basically, I think, how the education system's going. And again, the DFE, they've looked on what's really bad at the moment, which is SEND, not education as a whole, and gone, how can we improve teachers? How can we improve schools? How can we improve families' mental health? They've just gone, SEND, you're costing us way too money. We'll just blame it all on families and schools and push all the problems back that way, is my sort of perspective on it, rather than going, actually, let's look at it as a whole and fix the system, and then I think things will start be putting in place. But I think the biggest thing is for me to come out with this white paper is, one, that parents still hold legal right to their child, and they're not having to scavenge over EHCPs, which are already hard enough. Mine took 5 years to get to where we are. I know people that are still struggling, but also teachers, I hope they get more time back to spend what they love doing, which is teaching, not restraining, wrestling, counsellors, filling in paperwork, accident reports. I remember getting a call saying, your child's been on the field for 4 hours, we can't get him in. Can you get him in? How many wasted hours did those teachers spend on the school field with my child? So that's, I suppose, in a nutshell. We could go on about it all night and all day, but
100%.
come out of it is put the child first and their need versus the money it costs, and then look at how they can better support schools to take on this enormous gargantuan task, which is what they're proposing to do.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there. So more holistic, yeah, because we're, like you say, they've looked at the finances, they've looked at where they consider the problem to be, and I think people maybe there's a bit too much laser focus on where they believe the problem is, where perhaps it's more of a holistic issue that we look at.
Absolutely,
just
but
look
take the
at the
pressure
whole
away as
system.
well from Ofsted, because schools are under such pressure from Ofsted. You don't get an opportunity to be able to be holistic because you've got Ofsted coming after you, which also causes problems on the other
Yeah,
side. If you don't get your scores,
yeah,
no
and
one
I
wants to go
think
to that
we've taken
school.
away that. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned time. I mean, we're running out of time, but I just wanted to pick you up on one last thing that you mentioned that I think is interesting, and that is time spent, well, not just teaching, but time with the students. It's a pressure cooker in a school. You're under pressure as a teacher. The students come in, they've got to be learning from the moment they come in till the moment they leave. And this frustrates me because although I can understand that we don't want to waste their learning opportunities, that's also not how human beings operate. With that, yeah, so I don't know, that frustrates me sometimes. I mean, I don't even like during my form times in the morning, we are, all schools do this, we have a program of things we have to deliver in form time, and I'm thinking sometimes I just want to talk to the students and understand a bit more about them, get to know them. I mean, I sometimes try to organize trips. I've been promising some students in my form that we're going to go fishing, so I've agreed with the head teacher that I'm going to do a fishing trip, because some of the boys keep showing me these pictures of carp that they've caught, and things like that. So I want to bring back more of that, which goes back to what you're talking about being holistic. So ironically, I think to improve schools, we need to stop worrying about how well schools are doing in terms of outcomes. We're obsessed with outcomes and measuring things, and it's not working. And it's eventually someone's got to be brave enough to stand up and say, you know what, this isn't working. We need some wholesale change. But yeah, I think that's probably a good place to leave it. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention that I might have missed that you hoped that I would ask? I don't know. I've probably hardly asked any of the questions I have written on my list.
That's okay. Maybe it's been a good conversation. I mean, like I said, I think school is pressured in itself to pressure students to pass tests. And as you say, as a society, I remember the days, like, for example, I grew up in Spain, and the teachers were part of the community as well. You didn't just see them in school. You saw them doing football coaching, rugby coaching, I suppose, over here. You saw them in the local tapas bar. They were part of the community. They weren't these, oh my God, for example, I remember me and my son once for one of his teachers in Aldi, and it was immediately Miss So-and-so. And, what are you doing here? I think, again, they've taken away the humanity of school, and that you guys are humans too for these students. Again, the difference between a SEND school in his current SEND school, everyone goes by a first name. There is no formality. You're equal. You're human, just as me. Having to remember, calling you Mr. Harwood. I mean, you'll probably think that was your dad's name. You're just Tony. I think that's where everything's gone a bit wrong. We've taken the humanity out of school. We've made teachers, again, the bad guys, because you guys are the ones consistently asking for homework, consistently asking for better scores, do more, do this, do that. Because, again, in return, you are requested to be on top of things to get those scores, to make sure you get the outstanding Ofsted reports and so on and so forth. I think if schools did actually return to be part of the community, and it plays a massive role, and schools were more fun places to be. So again, you only had 3 hours of intense learning, but the rest of it was learning, social skills, humanity skills, going fishing, all these things that you need to learn or that interest a child. I think you'd have a lot less diagnoses, children missing in education, EBSA. You'd also have a lot less teachers leaving the positions. You'd have an influx of teachers rather than incoming versus outgoing. At the moment, we're seeing, I think it was the last figure was like 100,000, like 90,000 a year leaving the industry, which is terrifying.
Yeah, it is.
But again, if you made it more of a, I think coming back to it, if you made it more human, you'd see a lot more people coming in and a lot less trauma from all angles, not just the children's side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it does feel very much like that. And like I said, not a great deal seems to be changing at the moment, but we have hope for the future. I recently had an Ofsted experience that I don't want to go into now, to be honest, but I will in a future show. So look out for that one if you're watching this. I think in a couple of weeks, Yannick, my regular guest Yannick, and I are going to get on. So if anyone's watching this now and wants to come in and talk with me about Ofsted and my experiences on that, but I'm not going to say too much now, but let's just say things aren't changing and improving in the way that I hoped that they might do under the new Ofsted framework. Let's just leave it like there for now. But Ellie, I just want to say thank you so much. We really appreciate you giving up your time to come and talk to us. Do let us know if you want to come on again in the future. But it's been really interesting chatting to you. And yeah, I'm sorry we've only scratched the surface of some of the stuff, but hopefully some useful things have come out that people would have learned. There's certainly some things that you've said that I've found really interesting and that I didn't know as well. So thank you so much. That is it from us, guys, here on The Twilight Show. I'll be back in 2 weeks. So to everybody watching, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you all have a thoroughly pleasant evening. So good evening, everyone, and goodbye from us.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.